everybody. This is Nick with Tenacity.ai with my co-host Jason, and you're listening to the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast. Today we're going to discuss some news out of Microsoft. Azure is now offering savings plans, much like AWS. They announced this mid-October. And, it's going to help level the playing field, I think, from the provider perspective. It's been a gap from the Microsoft side for quite a while. Jason, what are your thoughts? I know this is kind of a preliminary discussion for us.
I think they're making it easier to save money. I think historically, this was a differentiator for AWS, whereas Azure would come in and get you into some sort of enterprise agreement, which the enterprise agreements require a level of commitment that's a little bit different than what you would expect. If you want to just go, I want to go spin some stuff up, right? Get stuff working. I'm an organization like that. And so a savings plan makes it easier for you to save money based on by committing to a certain amount of spend without having to get into these, huge Microsoft enterprise agreement type contracts. So I think it's great that they're doing it. I think it's it was a differentiator that AWS had that they would tout often because in AWS there are enterprise agreements. They're just not as common as in Azure. I mean, it's like because they had all these other savings instruments, and so you're really just a huge organization if you have an enterprise agreement, and that's really what those are intended for, not for smaller companies, which is what they were doing with smaller companies historically.
Yeah, I think Microsoft's been battling their legacy customer licensing model for quite a while. And AWS didn't have that problem from the start. They were able to adopt an enterprise discount program that made sense in the context of offering public cloud services that were consumption-based. And I think Microsoft came from a world of, capital expenditures and long-term licensing agreements and trying to predict the next 3 years of usage, software assurance, and so on. And you can see this in how the difference between how the two providers provide licensing for Windows or SQL Server, et cetera. You got the hybrid benefits of Microsoft, which can be a little bit nuanced and complicated for people to understand if they're in if they're trying to make sense of, should I use a EA agreement or whatever they call them now, Microsoft customer agreement or whatever they are, and my pay-as-you-go or my CSP or whatever agreement I'm in from an Azure billing model side. So it's interesting to me, and it's cool to see that they're catching up to the times. They're offering savings plans, which I think is a little smoother model to not worry about. There's still licensing concerns and so on, but it is definitely a shift in Microsoft moving to modern consumption-based discount plans.
Yeah, click through terms, right? What a novel idea, right? If I want to commit to that's at the end of the day what an enterprise agreement is. It's a commitment to a certain amount of spend for a certain discount, and that's all a savings plan is. And so prior to this, the only method to do that was to sign, physically sign a contract with Microsoft, right. And they went to the point and click model. It makes complete sense we see customers that aren't using any savings instruments all the time. This is the least anyone can do, because you can literally look back and go, this is what my compute is. We obviously help customers do this, and you're going to save over what you were paying right away just by committing to this. And you can choose what level you want to commit to from a spend perspective. So if you wanted to go conservative, you could pick a number that's way lower than your average compute utilization, and you're still going to save money. So it's long overdue, actually. And honestly, I'm not so sure. Remember, we stumbled across this. Where was this huge announcement about savings plans out in the market? I don't really know, but obviously it didn't take us very long to find it. It took us 2 weeks, but we're in it. We do this for a living, and it took us 2 weeks to find it. Can you imagine how many customers of Azure have no idea that this exists? I would imagine a
Yeah.
lot of them.
Yeah, I feel like it didn't blow up in my feeds like it should. Now, maybe it's the noise in the rest of the world, and maybe it's just that, it is sort of a tread lightly into the market because it's something that should have been here, honestly, years ago from a competitive standpoint. So maybe it's a squeak in and people will start using it. I don't know. I don't know. What the
Yeah,
strategy is there.
because I can only imagine if they put it out and then the next day, I don't know, 25% of their customers sign up for it. That's a probably big hit on revenue, right?
Well, there is definitely a disincentive for heavily promoting for any of the providers heavily promoting the commitment-based plan. They're not like, especially a company like Microsoft with sort of its legacy buying model, and what we're seeing is by and large in the industry, we're seeing buying models shift to product-led and consumption-based,
Yes.
right? Is another way of saying it. And this old way of buying, I mean, I've been buying for over 20 years. You've been buying for 20 years. There was a fear from the vendors that you were somehow going to vacate if you weren't tied into this 3-year
Locked
model.
in.
Who the heck was going to vacate their Windows strategy when everything was based on, Windows Server and SQL Server at that point in time? I mean, if you made $1 million investment into Microsoft licensing, it's not like you were going to just pick it up and leave next month. That would be unfathomable and extremely hard. That is definitely more a reality in the current cloud space. I mean, serverless and containerization take us there. I think this is a little bit of the buying model is catching up to the reality of the marketplace, and who's going to tie themselves to a 3-year Microsoft agreement right now when you can go consume a service, try it out, decide you don't like it, and go do something else.
Yeah, I think it's a feather. It's now a feather in their sales. It's a tool in the sales toolkit now. When they're going out,
Yeah.
they no longer have to say we don't have savings plan compared to AWS. They now can say that. That's what it is to me. And there's still, obviously, I think we talked a little bit about how much or the lack thereof of the marketing around this. If all of these providers could charge you public pricing, right, or pay as you go pricing, if that's where the market was set, they would be. This is only in reaction to the market. And so they're only going to implement these things in a way that give you the recommendations, which maximizes the amount of money they keep from you, right? Not the amount of money they save you. It's true across the board because it's a perverse incentive for them, right? And so, really understanding what your utilization is across your environment and having that data across long periods of time, which is typically not something they give you, is really important to making and choosing the right, first of all, the right instrument, savings plan, reserved instance, but also what level of commitment from each of these. That's really difficult to do just using the provider tools.
Yeah, I haven't spent a lot of time yet in the Azure billing data around their commitment-based discounts, so I can't speak with authority there yet. Though, give me a few weeks and a couple $100 and I'll be there. But it's when I've done this analysis in AWS, and I have spent a lot of time deep down in the AWS data trying to understand and understanding their recommendation engine and their recommendation model. And it's as you say, it doesn't actually optimize or maximize around the users in what they can save. It is sort of a vanilla recommendation, especially when you start looking back in time. You do a look back period of 30 or 60 days. You got to be really careful with those recommendations because they might not be contextually relevant to what you're doing that particular day. And there's a little bit of danger there in not, in just buying based on a recommendation. You have to be a little bit careful. And so, we've built our platform around that. We've built our platform around making much better decisions for the customer in maximizing their savings and then taking it a step further and helping them understand where they can go down the refactor path. But I'm sure, Microsoft here boasts, up to 65% savings, which is right on par with what AWS boasts as well. But, the reality is that you have to have a really optimal situation in order to leverage that sort of savings, meaning that you're nailing your daily spend, which, when you start looking at consumption, that's just not the reality inside a compute. Maybe if you're only using virtual machines and you're very consistently using the same ones all the time.
Steady state.
But
yeah,
steady state. But then honestly, you're throwing money away because you're not actually leveraging the benefit of the cloud. And so
right.
That's an environment that's
these are perfect.
For,
the 65% is perfect world scenario. It's no different than the gas mileage that they put on your vehicle. Right? That's with premium, no headwind, bald tires for no friction, whatever it is. It's like that's the best you'll ever get with perfect and driving at 60 miles an hour. Nobody does that, right? We drive 80. We have headwind. And so it's the same analogy here. This 65% is some situation in which applies to, 1% of, all customers. And can you achieve that? Yes. But it's highly dictated on some pie in the sky workload that isn't really in reality. I think more in reality, you're looking at 20 to 30% savings here is more of a, from an AWS perspective, it's around that amount.
That's the easy button, right? That's the easy button. Getting 20% savings. It's easy for customers to choose it. It's better for the providers. It tends to be where we see organizations when they hit the easy button and just renew a really low yield 1-year plan at a safe level, and they're only choosing that because they have to make that decision once. When you've had to make that decision hundreds of times, or you specifically with your building software to make that decision, you can be much more efficient and much more on target with where optimal savings exists. And that's the benefit of using a platform outside of the providers. It's not brain surgery or rocket science here that the providers are really not incented to give you the optimal plan of what mix of services, savings plan discounts, and reserved instances you should use to optimize your spending. And that's okay, actually, because that leaves space for people like us to go and do fun and smart things.
Mm-hmm. Which we'll have, by the end of the year? For Azure.
Yeah, we will. For Azure? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's new. So, we don't have it yet. It's brand new. But, we're working on integrating it right now.
Yeah, I like that the partner API, they specifically note this in the partner portal. The partner APIs are not yet fully deployed or fully available to us. So we're going to end around that with the billing data, which is entirely another thing in Microsoft. We'll do a whole podcast on the whole Microsoft
APIs.
Billing data and how it's different for every type of model that they have. So
we'll link to that show in here. A tidbit is that none of their APIs are complete yet. So that's why I laughed when you said the partner center API isn't completed yet. It's like, none of their APIs are complete, and they're always constantly changing and mashing them together. So that'll be a fun episode next time.
Well, and we'll find out when we're hitting them and pulling data. We'll see if we get the same result they tell us on the front end. So, all right, that's it for today's show. Thanks everyone for listening in. Stay tuned every Monday and Wednesday for new episodes of the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast.